Boy, do I have a treat for y'all today. I'm about to share with you the greatest B2B funnel of all time. So if you're in the agency space or if you're in a saturated market, then this is for you because, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to share that. I don't even know where to start. So let's just dive into it. Um, Share my screen here because you know how we roll, baby. Um, Here it is. So oftentimes, for example, so many people running emails, but cold out email outreach, and oftentimes it takes, if you're lucky, one out of every 500 emails, lucky or skilled, disclaimer, it takes one out of every 500 emails to land a client. What's the breakdown of that? Is that you send out 100 emails. Say, for example, 1/2% of that becomes books a call. So out of 500, that means that you're looking at a total of 2.5 calls, round up to 3. Now your closing rate on that needs to be 30%. So you need, if you have the exceptional sales process and exceptional closers, you're closing 30% of those. And that in itself is difficult to do. Now imagine sending out less than a tenth of that and getting a client. For example, oftentimes you get into trouble when you're sending out more than 100 emails a day from one domain. So if you're sending out, that's 2 clients every day just from email. That's what this funnel can do. So in my last agency, I didn't want to cold call. I was confronted with the same problem. Like, hey, the market segment that we're going after is companies that were doing over 8 million a year in revenue. So that's a finite number of companies, and targeting the companies and the decision makers and actually opening those doors is hard. I'm not just going to spend my entire day cold calling to generate that business because at the same time I had a team to manage, had other responsibilities. So focusing on cold calling, and I'm a 50% shareholder, was not the most efficient use of my time. And we also did not want to spend thousands of dollars training our pixel to target the decision makers on those companies in Meta. Most of our business up to that point had come from referrals. We had built a really strong, a rock solid foundation. And I started to have this idea for this funnel when I was looking at surveys on LinkedIn that said 66% of CEOs made large purchasing decisions from a referral. So even if I did all that work of cultivating a lead, cold calling, opening those doors, nurturing and building trust, I might still lose that deal to somebody that the CEO already knows. So I knew that there had to be a better way to get in front of these decision makers. This is what led me to create the ABM podcast funnel, the account-based marketing podcast funnel. So understanding the referrals and where that business was in their life cycle was the key to cracking this. So what I had done was I broke out the individual pieces. But oftentimes our customers that are in that around that 8 million a year revenue range, they're still too small for a full-time CMO. But they would oftentimes hire a fractional CMO. Fractional CMOs also have many relationships with clients at a given time, where they would have the ear of the CEO and influence on the purchasing decision, which means they could introduce us to the accounts that we wanted to do business with. So this is what we had come up with. It's number one. Targeting the listening audience. What does our audience care about? Understanding that avatar and breaking that out. What is the content that they want to consume that's important to them, that helps them move the needle and solves their biggest pain points? Now, people that we can sell to, marketing executives, brands, or other marketing agencies that don't serve the same need that we do. Then people with large followings or personal brands, guest speakers, large LinkedIn followings. Why is it that the guest following makes sense? Well, they already have their audience already has a level of trust with them. So by targeting people with already large personal brands, we then tap into that audience with the podcast, which is why this was such an efficient funnel. So the best guests were people who weren't just marketing executives, but also had high LinkedIn engagement or were guest speakers, because they could introduce us to the accounts that we wanted to get into, and they would share and repost our content, which would allow us to tap into their audience. Now, the problem with you've probably seen this funnel or somebody try to run a variation of this funnel, but oftentimes where they miss the mark is actually on the building trust component. Because what happens oftentimes is, instead of approaching it from a more holistic or relationship standpoint, they'll just go straight into their fucking pitch right after the episode. They'll just book a call and then try to pitch the person. Whereas what we had done and how we had done this differently, which is why it was so effective, was we would sit down with them and ask questions about their market during the podcast and ask them about their market that showed a level of sophistication. It showed them that we knew the market. So there was already authority and trust built, not just through the exposure and the conversation of the podcast and the content, but then on the next call, what we would do is we just have an honest conversation about what they were struggling with. Where it is that they're at? What are their customers struggling with? And try to understand how we can be of help. We wouldn't just go straight into the pitch and like, this is what we do, this is what we're about. That would just come up naturally. We would push that back as far as possible. We'd try to delay that as much as possible so that they would bring it up, that they would be the one asking. And they did that because in psychology, we have that concept of reciprocity. It's the same reason why whenever you go to the tailor, they'll often give you a cup of whiskey or they'll give you a cup of water. Now, they do that because they understand this concept of reciprocity and that you're more likely to buy something if you're given something. So we had built and replicated a workflow for the best episode flow, the best interview questions that helped us tap into and make sure that we're building quality content for our listening audience. Nope, not what we not what we want to look at. Now, the other piece and component that made us unique is we had a strong enough unique selling proposition that separated us and would help them introduce us to other accounts. And this worked really well because we were going after a sophisticated audience. And how this showed up in the numbers is that 70% of the people that we had spoken to after the podcast agreed to refer us business, which is insane. Imagine having a 70% closing rate, but instead of them just bringing one client, they're bringing several. And this is why this funnel was such a game changer. Now, if you don't have a unique selling proposition, and if you're offering a commoditized service or service delivery that delivers average results for clients, this, first off, is probably time to reevaluate. And then second off is to brand a service, to create some unique mechanism or capture or position the mechanism that you're selling, even though it may be what everybody else is doing, but to position that as, it's funny. I was just listening to some content, the realtor that I follow on Instagram. He was talking about how he sells himself at a networking event. And how he sells himself is that he focuses on creating elevated luxury experiences to relocate their lifestyles. A lot of jargon in that, but it sounds cool and it sounds interesting instead of just, I'm a realtor. So by positioning that, it's going to help tie into the overall partner journey or customer journey that you want to target for your specific audience that you're going after. Now, the reason why this was such a great funnel was the efficiency that came with this. Now, Ray Dalio, hedge fund billionaire and CEO of Bridgewater, talks about creating 1 + 1 = 3. And what he means by this is what are the ingredients that we can create or combine to create a new product that's worth more of the sum of the individual parts. So, yeah, Scott, that sounds super intellectual and fancy, but what are we talking about here? Well, let's look at cake. There's flowers, eggs, sugar, vanilla. By themselves, these individual ingredients are commodities and cheap. However, together, the best baker can combine these ingredients that maybe cost $5 total, probably less than that, $2 to $5 to create a cake that's worth $30 to $40. Some, even a wedding cake, you could sell for $200. That probably seems on the low end. I don't know. I'm not gonna. I'm not married yet, so I have no idea how much a wedding cake costs. I know some people spend 30 to 40 grand on a wedding, so I have no idea if that's accurate. But you get the analogy. Now, this funnel, the reason why this works is because it's 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 15. How is that possible? Well, we get to open doors. We can create long form content, create short form content from that long form content, use that content to produce ads, and build an audience. Alexa's tripping. So, but that's not even, this is the 80-20 of it. There's actually more that can be done from this funnel. For example, you can take the transcript from the episode, keyword optimize it, and then put that on the website. Put the podcast on the website, and then also the transcript on the website. Capture more search traffic if SEO is part of the acquisition strategy. Now, if you want to launch a podcast without having to manage all the production, the video editing, learning the best microphone, learning how to target the right avatar, and the 6 months, it's actually 18 months, but it took us about a year to get our feet wet, and then it took us about 6 months to actually refine the process and figure out what it is that we were doing. So if you want to skip that, you want to skip the 18 months involved in building out this funnel and building out the exact strategy that's tailored for your market, where you want to go after the audience, guest targeting, creating the same Venn diagram for your market that we created internally, and then also managing the guest outreach, where we send out personalized Zoom videos. And how is it that we can actually not just create this traffic and create this audience, but funnel this into real customers, plus the back end infrastructure and the distribution of the content to all social platforms, editing the long form, editing the short form. We can take care of this completely end to end without you having to come up with the entire strategy, come up with everything that I just mentioned. I mean, if you were to hire the team to do this for you, everything end to end, you'd be looking at about a 20K per month investment. So do this in the best possible way. Fortunately, I'm not going to charge you that. So if you do have an avatar, though, that's hard to target or in a saturated market, this strategy will work perfectly for you. So one of the companies that I invested in is launching 3 ABM podcast funnels for companies. We have limited space because we're really focusing on quality as we get the product right. So book a call with me in the description.